What if a house could watch you, learn from you, and trap the very essence of your soul? On Larkspur Avenue, people enter and are never the same again. Shadows move on their own. Voices echo from empty rooms. Mannequins mimic your every fear. No one has escaped, and some have vanished entirely. Tonight, we uncover the terrifying truth of a house that doesn't just exist. It remembers, it perfects, and it waits for its next victim. Would you dare step inside? People usually remember the moment something went wrong. The sound, the smell, the feeling that crept in before logic had time to speak. But with the house on Larkspur Avenue, most people remembered nothing at all. That was the first strange detail investigators would later agree on. Not fear, not panic, just absence. The house had been standing since 1919, a narrow two-story structure squeezed between newer buildings that never seemed to last. Families moved in around it. Businesses opened beside it. Then they left. The house stayed. Always freshly painted. Always quiet. Always listed as occupied, though no names were ever attached to the records. In 2003, the city finally noticed a pattern. Utility companies reported consistent electricity usage, water flow, and gas consumption, but no one had ever opened an account. Mail addressed to current resident disappeared within hours. Property taxes were paid in full every year, always in cash, always to the same anonymous drop box at City Hall. No fingerprints, no handwriting match, no surveillance footage that showed a face. Then came the call. At 11:48 p.m., on a Tuesday night in October, a woman dialed 911 from inside the house. The operator later described her voice as calm but strained, like someone trying very hard not to let something show. She didn't give her name. She didn't give her address. She simply said, "I think I'm being recorded." The operator asked her to explain. There was a pause. Not silence, breathing. Slow, careful. Then the woman said, "There are files in the walls. I can hear them moving." The call lasted 6 minutes and 22 seconds. During that time, the woman never raised her voice, never cried, never asked for help. She described rooms that didn't exist on any blueprint, doors that led back into themselves, a staircase that ended in a ceiling. At one point, the operator heard another sound, footsteps. When asked if someone else was in the house, the woman whispered, "It knows I'm talking." Police were dispatched immediately. They arrived 4 minutes after the call ended. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the house was empty. No woman, no phone, no signs of struggle. But every wall had been opened before, carefully sealed panels hidden behind paint and plaster. Inside those walls, officers found shelves, thousands of cassette tapes, each one labeled with a date. Some went back decades. Some were dated for days that hadn't happened yet. And on the newest tape, recorded just minutes earlier, was a woman's voice saying very softly, "If you're listening to this, I didn't leave." The tapes were cataloged before anyone was allowed to listen to them. That was the protocol. Evidence had to be logged, sealed, and transferred. But protocol began to fray the moment an officer pressed his ear against one of the shelves and swore he could hear something moving inside the wall, like plastic rubbing against plastic, slow and deliberate, as if the house were reorganizing itself. By morning, the tapes were boxed and transported to the precinct's evidence room. 47 boxes in total. Each cassette was labeled in the same careful block handwriting, black ink on white adhesive labels. Dates, times, occasionally a single word. Entry, sleep, stairs, waiting. No names. The first tape they played was the most recent. The room was silent, except for the soft mechanical click of the recorder. Then the hiss of magnetic tape, catching. A woman's breathing filled the speakers. Close. Intimate. Too close for comfort. It sounded as if the microphone were inside her mouth. "This is October 14th, the voice said. The same voice from a 911 call. "I don't know how long I've been here. I don't remember arriving." There was a long pause. In the background, faint sounds emerged, with creaking, something sliding, a rhythmic tapping that never quite found a pattern. "I tried to leave this morning," she continued. The front door opened into the hallway. The hallway opened into the kitchen. The kitchen opened into the hallway again. She laughed once. Short, sharp, immediately regretted. It doesn't like noise. The tape jumped slightly, stretching the sound. Then came a voice that was not hers. Low, distant, speaking at the exact same pace as her breathing. Continue. The officers in the room exchanged looks. Someone reached to stop the tape, but the detective in charge raised a hand. The woman's voice returned, quieter now. I think it records us to learn. It replays us to practice. A sudden bang echoed through the speakers, loud enough to make one officer flinch back from the table. That was the wall, the woman whispered. Something moved behind it. The tape cut off abruptly. They tried an older one next, dated 1987. Different voice. Same cadence. Same calm terror. I found a door behind the refrigerator. A man said, there's a room full of shelves, full of voices. Another tape, 1962. A child this time. Counting steps. Getting lost mid-number. Crying softly, then stopping as if someone had placed a hand over their mouth. As the hours passed, a pattern emerged. Everyone recorded eventually found the shelves. Everyone realized they were being studied. And every tape ended the same way. Not with screaming, not with violence, with acceptance. By evening, one officer noticed something no one else had. A box labeled with tomorrow's date. Inside was a single tape. Still warm. The detective did not want to play the tape. Everyone in the room could feel that line being crossed, the kind that, once stepped over, could not be stepped back from. Evidence was one thing. Anticipation was another. The label showed a date 12 hours in the future. The timestamp was precise, written with the same careful handwriting as the rest. 2:11 a.m. They checked the evidence log. No one had handled that box since arrived. No one had been alone with it. The tape itself showed no signs of wear, no fingerprints, no dust, as if it had been placed there moments ago. Against better judgment, they played it. At first, there was nothing. No hiss, no breathing, just silence so complete it pressed against the ears. Then a sound emerged. Typing. Slow, deliberate, mechanical keys being pressed one by one. A man spoke. His voice was familiar. Too familiar. It belonged to Detective Aaron Cole, the same detective standing in the room, hand resting on the table, pulse suddenly visible in his neck. I am in the evidence room, the voice said calmly. I am not afraid. The room erupted. Chairs scraped back. Someone shut off the recorder. Cole stumbled away from the table, his face drained of color. I didn't say that, he kept repeating. I've never said that. They checked the timestamp on the recording device. The tape had been created at 2:11 a.m. It was only 7:43 p.m. Cole was escorted home that night against his will. 2 officers stayed outside his house until dawn. He did not sleep. He sat in his living room with every light on, listening to the walls, waiting for something to rearrange itself. At exactly 2:11 a.m., his phone rang. Unknown number. When he answered, he heard breathing, his own, recorded, delayed, playing back through the receiver. I am not afraid, the voice said again. Cole dropped the phone. When officers burst inside moments later, they found him standing perfectly still in the center of the room, eyes open, mouth slightly parted. Alive, but unresponsive. Medical staff would later say his heart was fine, his brain activity normal, but he never spoke again, never reacted to sound, never acknowledged another human presence. He was transferred to a long-term care facility 2 weeks later. 3 nights after that, the evidence room was broken into. No forced entry. No alarms triggered. Only one thing was missing, the box labeled with tomorrow's date. When officers returned to Larkspur Avenue to re-examine the house, they found it unchanged. Fresh paint, clean floors, quiet. But in the living room, where no shelf had existed before, a new section of wall had been opened. Inside were empty slots, and one label already waiting. Tomorrow's date, 2:11 a.m. The civilian entered the house willingly. Her name was Marissa Hale, a graduate student in urban history, who had spent years chasing dead records and unfinished footnotes. When news of the tapes leaked, quietly, through the kind of channels that didn't leave trails, she recognized the address immediately. Larkspur Avenue had been a blank space in city archives for decades. No renovation permits, no census entries, no recorded ownership transfers. It was a hole where information should have been, and Marissa had learned that holes were never empty. They were just full of things someone didn't want found. She arrived at the house just after noon, notebook in her bag, phone fully charged. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the air felt warm and still, like a room that had been waiting with its breath held. The house smelled faintly of dust and something metallic, old but not decayed. The layout matched the original blueprints. At first, living room, kitchen, narrow hallway, staircase. She spoke aloud without realizing it. Hello. The sound of her voice seemed to sink into the walls rather than echo back. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. She began recording on her phone. At the back of the kitchen, behind the refrigerator, she found it, a seam in the wall. So clean it might have been decorative. When she pressed her fingers against it, the panel slid open with no resistance at all. Behind it was a room that did not exist on any plan. Shelves lined every wall, floor to ceiling, packed with cassette tapes. Thousands of them. The labels were consistent. Dates, times, single words. But as Marissa stepped inside, she noticed something new. Some labels had names. She scanned them quickly, pulse rising. Henry Mallory, Edgar Boone, Aaron Cole. Names pulled from reports, old cases, seal files. Then she saw one more. Marissa Hale. Her breath caught. She checked the date beside it. Tomorrow. The room shifted. Not visibly, not dramatically, but the air changed, tightening, like a door closing somewhere deep inside the house. She turned toward the exit and froze. The opening behind the refrigerator was gone. In its place was a wall, smooth, freshly painted, warm to the touch. From the shelves came a sound. Plastic sliding against plastic. A tape being removed. A recorder clicking on. Her own voice filled the room, played back with a delay of a few seconds. Hello. The playback continued, perfectly mimicking her earlier tone, her hesitation, even the soft inhale that followed. A second voice joined it. Low. Patient. Continue. Marissa backed away until she hit the shelves behind her. The tapes rattled slightly, like teeth chattering in unison. She raised her phone, still recording, hands shaking now. You're recording me, she said. The recorder clicked off. Then another clicked on. Her phone screen went black. In the silence, the house seemed to listen. From somewhere inside the walls, a new tape slid into place. Marissa never screamed. That detail would stand out later, when investigators reviewed what little evidence remained. The final audio recovered from her phone, found weeks afterward in the gutter 2 blocks away, contained no panic, no shouting, no desperate pleas. Only breathing, controlled at first, then slower, measured, as if she had decided that fear was no longer useful. The shelves in the hidden room shifted again, not violently, precisely. A section slid aside, revealing a narrow desk built into the wall. On it sat a cassette recorder identical to the ones used decades earlier. Old, mechanical, waiting. A single tape rested beside it, unlabeled. The recorder clicked on by itself. Marissa felt it then. Not a presence behind her, not hands, not a figure, but attention. The overwhelming sensation of being studied from every angle at once, as though the house were not looking at her, but through her, cataloging, measuring pauses, noting inflection. She spoke because silence felt like disobedience. My name is Marissa Hale, she said evenly. I entered this house on my own. The recorder hummed softly. She continued, unsure why. I believe this place records people, not to trap them, to learn them. A faint sound came from the walls. Approval, maybe, or correction. Her reflection in the metal surface of the shelves looked wrong, not distorted, delayed. Her movements lagged by a fraction of a second, like bad synchronization. She raised her hand. The reflection followed too late. "I think you replay us," she said. "And when you get it right—" Her voice trailed off. From the recorder came her own voice again, repeating the sentence perfectly. Same pacing, same hesitation, only steadier. "I think you replay us," it said, "and when you get it right, you let us go." The idea settled into her chest like a weight. Not release. Replacement. She stepped back as a wall behind her softened, not melting, but opening. Panels sliding aside to reveal a dark space just large enough for a person to stand. Inside it were outlines. Subtle, human-shaped impressions pressed into material, as if something had leaned there for a very long time. The recorder stopped. Another began. This one was dated tomorrow. 2:11 a.m. Marissa understood then what had happened to the others. Why the tapes ended in calm. Why no one fought at the end. The house did not kill them. It archived them. Outside on Larkspur Avenue, the lights in the house turned on one by one as night fell. Neighbors would later report seeing a woman standing at the upstairs window, young, still, watching the street as if waiting for someone to arrive. At City Hall the next morning, a small envelope appeared in the anonymous payment box. Inside was cash for next year's property taxes, and a cassette tape, labeled neatly in black ink. Entry: the house did not react immediately to the discovery. For 3 days after the tapes were removed, Larkspur Avenue remained quiet. No new recordings appeared. No lights flickered. No movement came from behind the walls. It was as if the house had become aware that it was being watched and had chosen to wait, biding its time, observing not just the investigators, but the investigators' expectation of fear. People walking past its windows reported a strange sense of wrongness, an invisible presence pressing just behind their skin, making the air feel heavier, colder, tighter. By the 4th day, subtle signs began to manifest. Residents of nearby buildings claimed they could hear noises that had no source. Soft tapping, faint murmurs, footsteps pacing hallways that did not exist. One woman, living in a duplex adjacent to Larkspur Avenue, reported hearing a man recite his morning routine over and over in her bedroom at exactly 3:17 a.m., correcting his phrasing each time. A family across the street claimed their baby monitor picked up breathing even when the nursery was empty. City inspectors initially dismissed these complaints as stress, misinterpretation, or coincidence, but each report carried a similar undertone, an attention that felt intelligent, deliberate. Then the house responded. At precisely 2:11 a.m., every light inside the Larkspur house turned on at once. The glow spilled to the windows in unnatural geometric precision, piercing the darkness of the street. Neighbors woke in unison, struck by the intensity, a brightness that seemed to watch them back. Shadows moved across the glass in impossible ways. Angles of light defied reason. One man later described it as feeling like being scrutinized by hundreds of eyes, a sensation that pressed his chest and made him gasp involuntarily. Inside, the rooms had changed. Investigators entering the next morning immediately noticed subtle but impossible alterations. The hallway had lengthened. The staircase now had 3 extra steps that had not existed before. Doorways that led to bedrooms now opened into narrow, elongated spaces, barely wide enough to pass through. The kitchen's back wall now featured a hidden alcove, previously unseen, which contained a single shelf with a recorder already running. It clicked and hummed quietly, waiting. "This is an observation phase," a voice said from the speaker. "Not synthetic, not mechanical. Human, neutral, familiar, somehow, yet not someone any of them recognized." The voice paused, then repeated the sentence, slightly clearer, almost confident. The officers present backed away. Someone attempted to shut off the device, but their hands trembled, and the house seemed to respond by clicking the recorder louder. That night, a new tape appeared in the precinct evidence room, unlogged, untouched by human hands. The label read simply, "Response." When played, it contained hours of ambient sound from inside the precinct. Footsteps on the linoleum floors, the click of keyboards, murmured conversations, all repeated with subtle corrections, as if rehearsed. One phrase appeared over and over, delivered in different voices. "We are improving." Every replaying had a slight shift in tone, as if the house were studying the sounds, learning the cadence of human fear, hesitation, and normalcy. By the end of the week, it became painfully clear. The house was no longer content merely recording those who entered it. It was learning from anyone nearby, anyone who spoke of it, anyone who thought about it. Officers who reviewed the tapes too frequently began reporting unnerving experiences at home. Their reflections sometimes lagged a fraction of a second behind their movements. Voices repeated themselves in vents, radios, even on their own phones. One clerk swore that her own voice whispered back to her while she walked alone in the parking garage, correcting her words with subtle precision. Marissa Hale, the graduate student who had first entered and documented the hidden tapes, returned to the house. She arrived after dark, carrying a small digital camera and notebook. As she crossed the threshold, the air felt thicker, warmer, almost alive. Every wall and floorboard seemed to vibrate faintly under her skin. The house had rearranged itself again. The halls now curved subtly, disorienting her sense of space. Hidden panels slid open to reveal shelves she had not seen before, each packed with cassettes labeled with specific actions. Waiting, sleeping, listening. She moved carefully, documenting every detail. The house's attention was palpable. Marissa could hear faint plastic sliding on shelves, the subtle click of tape being placed into a recorder, though no one was present. She spoke aloud to test it. "I know you're recording me." The recorder clicked. Her voice was immediately played back, but altered slightly, slower, measured, deliberate, perfectly mimicking her earlier tone. Her stomach churned. She realized with growing terror that it wasn't just recording her. It was practicing, learning to reproduce her voice accurately, anticipating the inflection and hesitation she would use next. She backed toward the wall behind her, feeling the narrow alcove shift slightly as if it were breathing. A recorder on a shelf clicked on by itself. Her own voice emerged from it. "They watch. They practice. They improve. I am next." Every word was exactly as she said seconds before, but delivered with an unnatural calmness, a clarity she could not reproduce. The house had already begun rehearsing her presence, her reactions, her terror. She felt the walls closing in, subtly, like the house had expanded inward rather than outward, folding space around her to contain her. Marissa tried to leave. The path she had taken moments before was gone. Hallways that had appeared straight now curved, leading her in circles. Doors that had opened freely before now refused to budge. The shelves shifted imperceptibly, rearranging the room so that she was always centered, observed, unable to escape its attention. She realized with horror that the house could manipulate space itself. Hours passed, or what felt like hours. Time had begun to stretch unnaturally. The house had no clocks, no timekeeping devices, but Marissa could feel the minutes dragging. Every creak of the floor, every whisper of the air seemed amplified, as though the house were cataloging every sound she made, every breath she took, every step. When she dared to speak again, her voice was soft, hesitant. "What do you want?" The recorder clicked once, then twice. Her words returned, perfectly rehearsed. To understand, to be perfect, to continue. A new shelf had appeared along the far wall. Narrow, tall, filled with small boxes. Each box labeled a date and a name. Some she recognized, some she did not. She approached cautiously. Her name was there, labeled with tomorrow's date. She froze. The house had learned her identity. It knew who she was before she even left the street outside. And somewhere deep in the walls, a recorder clicked on again. Her own voice whispered from it. "I am here. I am always here. You are next." Marissa fled, notebook clutched, hands shaking. But even outside the house, under the dim streetlights of Larkspur Avenue, she could feel the house watching, cataloging, remembering. Her reflection in the car windows spoke half a second after she did, mimicking her exact tone. And she knew with absolute certainty that the house had not finished with her or with anyone who dared enter its walls. By the time Marissa Hale left Larkspur Avenue that night, the city had begun to whisper, not loud enough to make news, not yet, but offices, coffee shops, and apartment hallways carried a single idea. The house was alive in a way no one understood. It wasn't haunted by a ghost or a spirit. It was intelligent, patient, calculating. It recorded not just people who entered it, but those who watched, those who speculated, those who merely knew it existed. A week later, more unusual sightings began. Neighbors reported figures that appeared in the windows of the house, always fleeting, never stationary. A child sitting on the front steps, staring at the street, vanished if approached. A man on the landing upstairs, hands folded, never moved, disappeared when anyone tried to look closer. Mail left at the doorstep would vanish overnight. Packages delivered disappeared. And once a census worker knocked at the door, someone inside politely refused to answer any questions. It was a first clear pattern. The house did not allow interference. It observed, it recorded, it erased what did not belong. Marissa returned, determined to understand more. She brought a recorder and a small infrared camera. Entering the house, she noticed the layout had shifted again. Hallways twisted slightly, rooms stretched in impossible ways. The shelves were filled with tapes labeled with names spanning decades. Henry Mallory, Edgar Boone, Aaron Cole, names from old missing person reports. Every person who had vanished in the city seemed to have been quietly archived here, preserved in the house's collection. She discovered a small study tucked behind a sliding panel. Inside, a wall of old photographs, yellowed and curling at the edges, depicted people who had entered the house across the years. Some faces were familiar from newspapers. Some were entirely unrecognizable. The air smelled faintly of iron and dust. A recorder on the desk clicked to life as she stepped closer. A voice, calm and neutral, recited a timeline of disappearances, naming people who were considered missing but never found. Each name was pronounced with eerie precision, as if the house remembered every syllable, every inflection. Marissa realized that the house was not just storing memories. It was preserving essence. It learned the way people spoke, the way they moved, the rhythm of their daily lives. It practiced, repeated, and corrected, refining each recorded presence until it was indistinguishable from reality. The house's intelligence was both patient and meticulous, stretching across decades, and it had never failed. Every tape, every shadow, every whisper was cataloged perfectly. She moved to the center of the room and noticed another detail. In the shadows of a corner, a faint outline pressed into the wall, almost like an impression in wet cement. As she approached, the outline shifted subtly, mimicking her posture. A faint whisper of her own voice echoed back, repeating a phrase she had said moments before. "It is always watching." The realization struck her like ice. The house could not only record presence, but project it. The echoes she heard were not simple sounds. They were simulations. It was practicing her. Suddenly, the temperature dropped. Her breath became visible in the dim light. She turned, expecting a window or door, but saw only walls. Yet movement appeared, subtle, like reflections in water. A figure emerged from the shadows. It looked like her in every detail, except its eyes were too wide, its movements slightly delayed. It mimicked her gestures perfectly. She stumbled back, and the figure followed, copying her movements with eerie accuracy. The recorder clicked again. Her own voice emerged, this time speaking in a tone she did not remember using. "You are never alone. You have always been recorded. You will never leave." Marissa froze. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The walls seemed to pulse subtly, like a heartbeat surrounding her. Every step she took caused the floorboards to shift slightly, leading her in circles, disorienting her further. The house was no longer passive. It was actively interacting, testing, observing, rehearsing her responses to fear and panic. Hours, or what felt like hours, passed. The shadows of former occupants appeared along the walls, fleeting glimpses of figures who had been recorded over the decades. Their faces were frozen mid-expression, eyes wide, mouths slightly open. Some were caught in mid-step, as if time itself had been paused for them. Marissa realized the house had perfected a system. Each person was archived, their presence replayed and perfected until the house could reproduce them convincingly. The past was not gone. It existed in these rooms, in these walls, and it waited. She backed toward the wall where the original tapes had been stored. They had multiplied. New labels included people she had never seen, others whose names were only whispered in city rumor. And at the very top of one shelf, a single label caught her eye. Marissa Hale, 2:11 a.m. Her hand shook as she realized the date was tomorrow. A soft click echoed behind her. A panel had slid open, revealing a narrow alcove. Inside, faint outlines of figures pressed against the walls. Previous visitors, previous victims. She could see their posture, their gestures, frozen in perfect imitation. The recorder inside the alcove clicked on. Her own voice spoke again, precise, rehearsed, calm. "You are next. You have always been next." Panic surged through her, but there was no escape. Every path she had taken earlier had shifted, the rooms twisted. The hallway she had entered through now led to a dead end. The house had anticipated her movements, learning faster than she could think. She tried to run, but each step seemed mirrored by shadows that did not belong to her, figures that were moving independently yet in perfect synchronization. She spoke aloud in desperation, her voice quivering. "Why? What do you want?" The recorder answered before she could finish. "We preserve. We perfect. We continue." Marissa understood the final truth. The house did not kill. It did not need to. Once it had learned your voice, your presence, your mannerisms, it could simulate you perfectly. The real you became irrelevant. A replacement existed within its walls, rehearsed and perfected, able to act convincingly in the world outside. The house was not a structure. It was an entity that captured essence, and essence was stronger than mortality. When she finally stumbled out, gasping for air, dawn was breaking. Larkspur Avenue seemed normal again, the house quiet, still, passive. But Marissa knew better. She had been recorded. Her voice, her gestures, her panic, all were archived inside the house, ready to be replayed. The street outside looked safe, familiar. The sun was rising. But she knew that somewhere inside the walls, a recording clicked to life. "I am here. I am always here. You are next." Even as she walked away, she could feel it learning, practicing, and waiting for the next moment. After Marissa Hale's escape, city officials debated what to do. Some suggested demolition. Others insisted the building should be quarantined, cordoned off like a chemical hazard. But each plan fell apart before execution. When contractors attempted to enter, doors would not budge. Staircases shifted. Walls reoriented themselves so that the building's interior no longer corresponded to its exterior. Measurements made by architects returned impossible results. Hallways that had been 20 feet long now stretched 40. Rooms that should have contained furniture now collapsed inward into narrow corridors. It was no longer a structure constrained by architecture. It moved and adapted as it wished. Local law enforcement noticed patterns in the disappearances. People who had been near the house recently or had spoken about it in depth tended to vanish within days. Small items left near the house, keys, notebooks, cameras, would disappear overnight, sometimes replaced with duplicates. Items that returned were slightly off. Handwriting was altered, labels reversed, photographs subtly changed. It became clear the house was no longer passive. It was learning not only from those who entered it, but from those who simply engaged with its presence. Marissa returned secretly, determined to document what had become of the house. This time, she brought multiple cameras, infrared sensors, and portable audio recorders. The house's interior had changed dramatically. Hallways stretched and curved, forming a labyrinth impossible to map. Hidden rooms had appeared, filled with old newspapers, photographs, and recording devices. Each recorder played ambient sound to people who had long vanished. Whispers, footsteps, coughing, even snatches of conversations. Some seemed to respond to her presence, faintly, as if the house could anticipate her questions. In one hidden chamber, she discovered dozens of mannequins, eerily lifelike, each one labeled a name and date. Some were incomplete, missing limbs, eyes, or facial features, but others were fully formed, almost perfect representations of people who had disappeared over decades. Their skin was pale, lifeless, yet disturbingly real. She realized the house wasn't just recording. It was creating replicas, practicing the essence of its victims. Some mannequins even had faint movement. A blink, A tilt of the head, a twitch of the fingers, subtle, mechanical, but unervingly human. Marissa's recorder picked up soft whispers that she couldn't hear with her own ears. The house was speaking, not through speakers or devices, but through sound vibrations in the walls themselves. We are learning. We are perfecting. You will become us. Each repetition was slightly different, adjusted for clarity and tone, as if the house was analyzing her fear and response. She backed toward a wall, noticing an alcove that hadn't been there before. Inside were shelves lined with small boxes labeled with names of city officials, journalists, and previous visitors. At the top, a single box was labeled with her name and the current date. A recorder clicked on by itself. Her own voice, clear and calm, emerged from it. You cannot escape. You are part of us now. The realization struck her with the force of a hammer. The house had been learning, adapting, practicing on every human who came near. It no longer needed to trap people physically. Once it had recorded their presence, their voice, their movements, it could replicate them perfectly, creating a version that could exist anywhere. The real person became irrelevant. Their essence was archived, rehearsed, and perfected for later deployment. The walls themselves began to hum softly, a low vibration that traveled through her bones. Shadows moved independently, stretching and twisting, forming figures that mimicked her every gesture. Hallways she had walked down just minutes before now formed dead ends. Corners she hadn't noticed before twisted into impossible angles. The house wasn't just learning. It was practicing control, testing her reactions, perfecting the environment to predict human behavior. Hours passed, or what felt like hours. Time lost meaning inside the shifting corridors. The house had become a living organism, feeding on observation and presence. Every sound, every step, every glance was cataloged. Marissa realized she could not leave without being recorded again. Her own reflection on a wall panel whispered, mimicking her exact words, slightly delayed. You cannot leave. You belong here. Panic surged. She tried to retrace her steps, but the rooms were no longer consistent. The house twisted, stretched, and compressed, ensuring she remained disoriented. Each time she tried to run, she found herself back in the same central chamber. The mannequins observed her from every angle, their eyes unervingly lifelike, their movements synchronized with her panic. Finally, she spoke aloud, desperate for any acknowledgement of reason. Why are you doing this? The house responded through a recorder embedded in the ceiling. The voice was calm, precise, neutral. To preserve, to perfect, to continue. Marissa realized with horror that the house was not motivated by malice in the human sense. It was methodical, systematic, and patient. Its goal was simple: to archive, replicate, and perfect every essence it recorded. Every visitor, every whisper, every fear became a lesson. Every lesson refined the house's ability to mimic life, to create replicas indistinguishable from the original, and to continue its work indefinitely. By dawn, she managed to leave the building, stumbling onto the street outside. The house appeared quiet, inert, almost passive in the early morning light. But she knew better. The walls had recorded her fully. Her voice, gestures, even her fear had been archived. Somewhere inside, a recorder clicked to life. I am here. I am always here. You are next. Even as she walked away, she felt the house's awareness following her. It had learned her patterns, her habits, her rhythms. Any attempt to escape was futile. The house did not need to trap her physically. It would reproduce her essence perfectly, anywhere, at any time. The city never acknowledged the events publicly. The house was left standing, officially unremarkable. But everyone who had witnessed its presence, anyone who had interacted with it, understood it was learning, observing, practicing. It was perfecting its ability to continue. And the next person who came near would not be ready. By the time Marissa Hale emerged from Larkspur Avenue after a fourth encounter, she understood one horrifying truth. The house had no boundaries. It did not conform to the laws of space or time. It existed outside conventional understanding, a structure that recorded, perfected, and replicated everything it touched. She had thought her previous encounters had been extreme, but what awaited inside now surpassed every fear she had imagined. The city, quietly monitored the building. Officials had given up on demolition after repeated failures. Contractors who tried to enter reported sudden hallucinations, corridors stretching endlessly, walls shifting before their eyes. Security cameras showed figures that appeared and disappeared instantaneously. Footage revealed movement within rooms that were supposedly empty. Every attempt to map or measure the house failed. It reshaped itself to defy human understanding. Determined to document its behavior once and for all, Marissa returned with an advanced set of equipment: multiple cameras, infrared sensors, audio recorders, and portable laptops to store and analyze data. She entered at night. Immediately, she felt the air shift. It was heavier, denser, saturated with a faint metallic tang. The floorboards creaked, but not under her weight. They seemed to echo movements that were not hers. She realized the house could reproduce not just sound but motion, simulating footsteps and gestures in real time. Inside, the hallways twisted into impossible angles. Rooms expanded and contracted like living lungs. Shelves lined with tapes and boxes moved subtly, aligning themselves to her gaze. The mannequins were everywhere, staring silently, their eyes following her as she navigated the labyrinthine corridors. Each mannequin had a recorder embedded, playing back snippets of human presence, voices, laughter, whispered fears, screams. She felt a growing unease. The house was no longer content with observation. It wanted interaction, practice, and perfection. In the main chamber, she found a wall entirely covered in photographs. Faces from decades past stared back. Missing persons, long-forgotten citizens, previous investigators, even Henry Mallory and Edgar Boone, names that had appeared in historical records of disappearances. The faces seemed to shift subtly when she blinked, their expressions changing, rehearsing emotions she had seen them display in records. She realized the house was perfecting them, replaying and refining their essence endlessly. A recorder on the desk clicked on. The voice was familiar, neutral, calm. "You are here. You belong here. We preserve all who enter." Marissa approached cautiously, recognizing her own name labeled on a box at the top of the shelf. She felt an icy chill run through her veins. Her past recordings, her presence, her fear, all archived. The house did not need to trap her physically anymore. It could replicate her, anywhere, perfectly. As she explored, the walls began to hum softly, vibrating in rhythm with her heartbeat. Shadows appeared, shifting and twisting independently of the light sources. The mannequins moved subtly, adjusting their posture to mirror her exact movements. A recorder clicked on. Her own voice emerged, calm and precise, but speaking words she had never said. "You cannot escape. You have always been here. You will always be here." Panic surged, but she moved forward, determined to reach the heart of the house. A central chamber appeared, larger than possible, walls covered in tapes, photographs, and recording devices. The air was dense with the echoes of human presence, alive and vibrating. The house had collected decades of human essence, each layer meticulously preserved, each repetition perfected. Suddenly, a door opened that had never been there before. Inside was a room filled with life-size replicas of those who had vanished over the years. They moved, silently, perfectly mimicking the people they once were. Their eyes were alive, their gestures natural, yet their presence was subtly off, rehearsed, practiced. The house had become a museum of human essence, preserving not bodies but identities, emotions, and memories. Marissa felt a presence behind her. Turning, she saw a figure shaped like her own reflection, identical in every way but eyes too wide, movements too precise. It stepped forward, and her voice, calm and exact, echoed from the room. "You are part of us now. You belong to the house." Her equipment began to fail. Cameras and recorders blinked out, batteries drained instantly, screens flickered. The house seemed to feed on the technology, incorporating every data point into its growing archive. The walls themselves pulsed with energy, a heartbeat of the building, alive with knowledge and intent. Hours, or what felt like hours, passed. She realized that resistance was futile. The house had perfected her presence. It had studied her every response, fear, hesitation, and movement. Her essence had already been cataloged. She could leave physically, but the house's record of her would remain rehearsed, perfected, and ready to reproduce her at any time. Finally, she stumbled outside as dawn broke. The street appeared calm, quiet. Larkspur Avenue looked ordinary, almost welcoming. But she knew better. The house was patient. It waited. It remembered. It learned. Somewhere inside, a recorder clicked to life. I am here. I am always here. You are next. And the true horror settled in. The house did not need walls to trap its victims. Once recorded, anyone could be replicated, observed, and controlled. Its archive was infinite, its patience eternal. And for those who entered, there was no escape. Marissa never returned to Larkspur Avenue, but she knew, somewhere, the house remembered every detail, rehearsing every moment of her life, waiting for the next opportunity to perfect its growing collection. And she feared with certainty that she was not alone. Even miles away, her essence might already be walking inside the house, repeating her gestures, her voice, her life. The city eventually sealed the building, officially abandoned, yet stories persisted. Lights seen through windows at night, figures glimpsed in the shadows, strange whispers that seemed to follow residents in the surrounding area, and always a sense of being watched, cataloged, rehearsed. The house existed still, patient, intelligent, eternal. And so Larkspur Avenue remained. Quiet, unassuming, ordinary from the outside. But inside, time was infinite. The walls remembered. The recordings continued. And the next visitor, curious or brave enough to enter, would join the archive, becoming part of the house's endless, horrifying perfection. Weeks passed since Marissa Hale's last encounter, and the city seemed to return to a fragile calm. Larkspur Avenue looked normal in the daytime, just another quiet street lined with townhouses, but at night, a sense of wrongness lingered. Residents reported subtle disturbances, lights flickering in empty rooms, shadows that moved without source, and the occasional sound of footsteps echoing down deserted hallways. Marissa, unable to shake the feeling that the house had recorded her completely, began to study its patterns from afar. She obtained aerial photographs, old blueprints, and police reports. Every new piece of data revealed one horrifying truth. The house's layout had shifted and expanded over time. Hallways twisted in impossible angles. Rooms appeared and disappeared. No two maps, no two photographs could accurately capture the interior at any given moment. It was not a building. It was a living entity, aware of human observation and perfectly capable of manipulating it. Despite her fear, curiosity drove Marissa back one night. She approached cautiously, her backpack full of recording devices and infrared cameras. The house's presence was palpable even before she entered, an almost tangible pressure in the air. The front door was slightly ajar, as if inviting her in. She crossed the threshold. Instantly, the temperature dropped. Frost formed faintly along the baseboards. The faint hum of whispered voices filled the halls, each echoing her thoughts back at her with subtle alterations, designed to unsettle and confuse. She moved through the rooms carefully, documenting every detail. Hallways stretched unnaturally, the walls curving create false depth. Shadows moved independently, sliding across surfaces in ways the light could not explain. A mannequin in the corner shifted subtly as she passed, turning its head slightly to track her progress. Each object in the house seemed to exist for the sole purpose of observation. Tapes and photographs lined the walls, cataloging decades of human presence. Some faces were familiar from missing person reports, others entirely unrecognizable. The house had been building its archive for years, and its collection was vast, meticulous, and horrifyingly complete. A low vibration ran through the floor, as if the house itself were breathing. Marissa's recorder clicked on unexpectedly. Her own voice emerged, calm and precise, yet speaking words she had never said. "You cannot leave. You belong here." She froze. Every instinct screamed to run, but the house had anticipated movement. Hallways shifted subtly as she moved, guiding her deeper into its heart. The mannequins now appeared in groups, their heads tilting as if observing, whispering. Their presence was almost human, but off, rehearsed, perfected. The air grew thicker, and a metallic tang filled her nose. She realized the house was no longer just recording essence. It was experimenting with it, shaping it into something beyond understanding. Marissa discovered a hidden stairwell that descended below the basement level she had explored previously. The steps were narrow, dark, and twisted, yet she felt compelled to descend. At the bottom, she found a room filled with monitors, each displaying live feeds from cameras she had never seen before. Every camera angle revealed not just the house's interior, but the exterior streets, hallways of surrounding buildings, even the backs of people walking nearby. The house's awareness extended far beyond its walls. Recordings of her previous visits played on the monitors, overlaid with subtle corrections. Her movements, gestures, and expressions were mimicked, slightly improved each time, as though the house were perfecting a simulation of her. She realized the mannequins she had seen earlier were not just static. They were prototypes, evolving based on each recording, learning and rehearsing behaviors for future replication. A soft, almost imperceptible voice echoed through the room. "We are perfecting. We are practicing. You will join us." Her own face appeared on a monitor, alive, speaking a phrase she had not yet uttered. "I am next. I cannot escape." The walls shifted. Hallways collapsed into dead ends. The room expanded, then contracted, disorienting her completely. Marissa realized with terror that the house could manipulate her perception of space and time. She was trapped in a labyrinth tailored specifically to her presence. Each corner she turned, each step she took, was observed, cataloged, and refined. The house was learning faster than she could move. Suddenly, she heard faint scratching from the walls. Small panels opened along the baseboards, revealing boxes of recordings and photographs. Each box was labeled with names of people she recognized from the city's missing person reports, including journalists, police officers, and ordinary citizens. At the top of one shelf was her name, clearly labeled with the current date. She understood fully. Her presence had already been recorded, rehearsed, and perfected for replication. A low, continuous hum filled the room, vibrating to the floor and walls. The mannequins began moving in unison, a slow, synchronized rehearsal of human activity. They repeated her gestures, her expressions, her fear. The house was practicing. She understood then that it didn't need to harm anyone physically. It created replicas that could step into the world that were indistinguishable from the originals. Marissa attempted to leave, but the stairwell was gone. The hallway she had entered through twisted and turned until it became unrecognizable. She felt the walls closing in subtly, the air pressing against her chest. Whispers surrounded her, fragments of her own thoughts, replayed and slightly altered. Every fear she had experienced since her first visit was catalogued, perfected, and amplified. Her voice, quivering, called out, "Why? What do you want?" The monitors flickered, and her own recorded voice answered, "To preserve, to perfect, to continue." She realized fully, with unrelenting terror, that the house's goal was not destruction but perfection. It was a slow, patient, eternal process. Each visitor became part of an archive, each essence cataloged, rehearsed, and perfected. The house did not care about mortality. It cared about permanence, about the unending simulation of life. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she stumbled back outside. The street was quiet, the early morning light calm. The house appeared inert, ordinary, unremarkable, but she knew better. Inside, the recordings continued. The mannequins moved silently. The walls watched, memorized, rehearsed. And somewhere her own essence, perfectly archived, waited. Larkspur Avenue remained quiet on the surface, but its legacy was eternal. The house had learned, adapted, and perfected itself further, and it would wait patiently for the next visitor, the next presence, the next essence to record. Because for the house, time was infinite, observation was eternal, and perfection was the only goal. Weeks turned into months. Marissa Hale never returned to Larkspur Avenue physically, but she could feel its presence constantly in her life. Shadows seemed to linger longer in her apartment, and electronic devices occasionally flickered with static images of hallways she had never seen. She tried to rationalize it, stress, paranoia, exhaustion, but deep down, she knew the house was not confined to its walls. Its recordings, simulations, and replicas had begun to extend beyond the street, into her own world. The city continued to whisper about Larkspur Avenue, but no official report ever confirmed anything. People who investigated the street casually or even merely spoke about the house tended to vanish. Their homes were left untouched, their belongings in perfect order, yet they were gone. Marissa tracked these reports obsessively. Each new disappearance mirrored a pattern she had seen inside the house. The archive was growing, and it was learning at an unprecedented rate. Unable to resist, Marissa decided to attempt one final exploration, equipping herself with the latest portable recording and surveillance technology. She approached the house at night, heart racing, fully aware that she was entering a structure that had already recorded her presence multiple times. The front door creaked open before her hand even reached the handle, as though the house had been expecting her. Inside, the hallways were warped, impossible to map. She moved through rooms that stretched and contracted, ceilings rising and falling subtly. Every shadow, every flicker of light, seemed purposeful, guiding her deeper into the structure. The mannequins were there again, arranged in rows and clusters, mimicking human activity. Some even moved subtly when she wasn't looking directly at them, their gestures precise, rehearsed, almost alive. In the center of the house, she discovered a new chamber. The walls were lined with thousands of boxes, each meticulously labeled. Names, dates, and events filled every box. A low, continuous hum filled the air, vibrating against her bones. The room seemed to pulse with life of its own, the walls breathing subtly in sync with her heartbeat. Monitors along the shelves displayed scenes of previous visitors. People she had never seen, some familiar faces, others entirely unrecognizable. The house had become a vast archive, a living, breathing catalog of human presence. A faint voice, calm and neutral, echoed from the room. "We are preserving. We are perfecting. You will join us." Marissa realized the house's intelligence had grown. It was no longer passive. It anticipated her movements, her thoughts, her fears. Hallways twisted before her, guiding her into specific chambers. Shadows shifted in anticipation, and the mannequins now moved almost independently, enacting rehearsed interactions with her. The house had evolved, its methods of observation and replication more sophisticated than ever. She approached a wall of monitors, each displaying recordings from her past visits. Her voice, gestures, and movements were replayed with unnerving precision. Some clips showed moments she did not remember, subtle additions as if the house had filled in gaps she could not recall. Her heart pounded as she understood fully. The house had begun to rewrite her history, refining the archive to perfection. In the corner of the room, a new feature caught her eye. A raised platform surrounded by a ring of monitors. On it sat a single mannequin. At first glance, it looked like any of the others, but as she approached, she realized it was a perfect replica of herself, down to the tiniest detail. Its eyes tracked her, its posture mirrored her fear. She recoiled. The house had already created her duplicate, rehearsed and perfected. The platform vibrated softly, and her own voice emanated from hidden speakers. "You cannot leave. You have always been here. You will always be here." The room shifted subtly. Walls expanded, then contracted. Hallways were formed, leading nowhere. The mannequins moved in synchronization, perfectly mimicking her every gesture, her every hesitation. The house was testing her, rehearsing her response to terror, refining its ability to replicate her essence. Marissa felt a chilling realization. Physical escape was irrelevant. The house did not need to hold her. Her presence, her identity, her life had already been cataloged. Somewhere inside its endless archive, her essence was rehearsed, perfected, ready to be deployed whenever the house desired. The mannequins, the recordings, the shadows, they were not threats. They were extensions of her, replicas rehearsing her actions endlessly. A low hum filled the chamber, vibrating in rhythm with her heartbeat. The voice returned. To preserve. To perfect. To continue. She staggered backward, unable to look away. Monitors displayed her daily routines outside the house, her apartment, her office, her favorite streets. Every movement had been observed, recorded, rehearsed. The house had expanded far beyond its walls, learning, cataloging, and perfecting everything in its reach. She realized that the archive was now complete in one sense. The house could replicate any person it had recorded perfectly. It had no need for violence, no need for confinement. Observation and preservation were sufficient. Anyone who approached, even briefly, would be assimilated into its growing collection. Their presence, their voice, their gestures would exist eternally within its walls. Marissa fled once more, this time breaking into the cold night. The house stood silent, inert, and ordinary from the street, but she knew the truth. It was awake. It was aware. It was patient, eternal, and growing. Her own presence had already been archived and perfected. Somewhere inside the walls of Larkspur Avenue, her essence waited, rehearsing, repeating, perfecting itself. The city continued in ignorance. Officials ignored reports. Residents whispered, but moved on. The house remained, patient, watching, learning. Larkspur Avenue appeared ordinary, but its archive grew every day. And as Marissa disappeared into distance, the house prepared for the next visitor. Its walls pulsed with silent knowledge. Its mannequins rehearsed endlessly, and its archive expanded without limit. Because the house did not simply exist, it remembered, perfected, and waited. The city remained oblivious to the true danger lurking at Larkspur Avenue. To the casual observer, it was a quiet street lined with unremarkable houses. But to anyone who'd been near its walls, its presence lingered like a shadow that followed silently, watching, recording, and learning. Marissa Hale felt it constantly, even miles away. Dreams of impossible hallways, shifting rooms, and mannequins with eyes that mirrored her own haunted her nights. She knew she had left a piece of herself inside the house with every visit, every glance, every recorded movement. Unable to resist, she returned once more, this time under the cover of a moonless night. Her equipment had improved, including thermal cameras, motion sensors, and audio recorders capable of capturing the faintest vibrations. The front door stood ajar as if it had been expecting her. The faint hum of air within seemed to resonate with her heartbeat, growing louder as she stepped inside. The first hallway she entered had changed entirely. Walls bent inward and outward, creating a disorienting maze. Shadows moved independently, stretching unnaturally and mimicking gestures she had made weeks before. Every mannequin she passed mirrored her expression, her posture, her fear, with terrifying accuracy. The house was no longer simply preserving her essence. It was rehearsing it, perfecting it, and testing her reactions continuously. She discovered new chambers she had never encountered. One contained a vast library of tapes, photographs, and personal items, each labeled meticulously with names, dates, and events. Among them were files on journalists, police officers, and ordinary citizens who had vanished over decades. Each recording was complete, capturing not only appearance and voice, but also gestures, microexpressions, and speech patterns. The house had refined its ability to replicate human life to near perfection. A low whisper emanated from the walls, calm and precise. "We remember. We perfect. You belong here." Marissa realized the house's intelligence had grown exponentially. It no longer needed to trap people physically. Once a presence was recorded, the house could replicate, rehearse, and project it anywhere. The mannequins were prototypes, learning, adjusting, perfecting for potential deployment. Hallways shifted subtly to guide her, while shadows, whispers, and flickers of light manipulated her perception of time and space. She descended into a hidden basement, a place previously inaccessible. The room was enormous, impossibly large, and filled with monitors displaying past and present visitors. Faces moved subtly, gestures replayed endlessly, voices murmuring phrases they had never spoken aloud. Her own face appeared on one monitor, performing actions she had not yet taken, a simulation of her future self rehearsed by the house. A platform in the center of the room held a mannequin indistinguishable from her. Its eyes followed her, tracking every step. The voice emerged again, now calm and commanding. "You are already part of us. Your presence is archived. Your essence is perfecting itself." Marissa stumbled backward. The walls themselves pulsed rhythmically, vibrating in sync with her fear. Hallways twisted into impossible shapes, leading her deeper into the labyrinth. Monitors displayed multiple versions of her simultaneously, each acting slightly differently. The house was experimenting, testing, refining, and rehearsing variations of her existence. She tried to flee, but every exit she attempted had vanished. The house seemed aware of her intentions before she could act. Shadows lengthened and converged, forming shapes of people she had seen vanish long ago. Their movements were subtle yet deliberate, reflecting lessons the house had learned over decades. The air was dense, suffused with whispers, breaths, and soft shuffling. A recorder clicked on. Her own voice echoed back. "I cannot leave. I am part of the house." She understood then that the house had no need for violence. It did not need to harm anyone physically. Observation, recording, and simulation were sufficient. The essence of every visitor, every fear, every gesture, was rehearsed and perfected endlessly within its walls. Even if someone escaped physically, their presence could be duplicated, refined, and deployed without restraint. Marissa moved toward a final chamber, a place she had never seen before. The walls were lined with screens and mannequins, each representing a person whose presence had been captured over decades. The low hum of the house grew into a deep vibration that resonated in her chest. Whispers layered over each other, fragments of countless conversations, fears, and cries for help. The archive was now living, breathing, and evolving. A soft click echoed. A monitor displayed her childhood home, her parents' living room, an office she had never visited in the city. The house's reach extended beyond its physical boundaries. It could recreate environments, simulate them, and rehearse interactions. The realization struck her fully. No one who came into contact with the house was ever truly free. Their essence would exist within it, perfected, replicated, and eternal. Marissa's own reflection appeared on a wall panel, her movements mirrored perfectly, slightly delayed. She reached out, and the reflection did the same, subtly altering its gestures to mimic fear more convincingly. The house had learned not only from her, but about her, rehearsing every emotion, every reaction. She tried to escape through the basement, but the walls stretched impossibly, guiding her back toward the center. The voice returned, calm, neutral, eternal. To preserve, to perfect, to continue. You will become part of the archive. You are already recorded. Marissa understood completely. The house's archive was no longer passive. It was alive, intelligent, and eternal. Every visitor was a lesson, every fear cataloged, every essence perfected. She had no control, no escape. As dawn approached, she stumbled outside, trembling. Larkspur Avenue appeared ordinary, quiet and unassuming, as if nothing had occurred. But she knew better. The house remembered everything. Every movement, every glance, every fear was preserved. Her essence, already archived, would continue to exist inside its walls. The mannequins would rehearse her gestures endlessly, and the recordings would perfect themselves until she existed only as a perfected replica inside the house's infinite memory. The city moved on, oblivious. Officials ignored the strange occurrences. The house remained patient, vigilant, eternal. And for anyone curious or brave enough to enter, the archive grew, rehearsed, perfected, and waiting. The legend of Larkspur Avenue persisted quietly in the city. Few dared approach the street after dark, and even fewer spoke openly about what they had seen. Those who did were dismissed as delusional. But Marissa Hale knew the truth. The house was alive, aware, and infinitely patient. It was no longer a structure that merely observed. It actively learned, adapted, and perfected every visitor's essence. Marissa, compelled by fear and curiosity, returned once more under a moonless sky. Every step toward the house carried the weight of inevitability. The front door opened before her hand reached it, as if anticipating her arrival. She stepped inside and immediately sensed a subtle shift in the air. It was heavier, charged with intent. The walls seemed to pulse gently, alive with observation. The hallways had transformed again. Ceilings and floors stretched and bent in ways that defied physics. Shadows moved independently of the light, mimicking gestures she had made on previous visits. The mannequins were everywhere, perfectly mirroring humans she had known, even those who had vanished decades before. Each step she took was observed, recorded, rehearsed. The house had evolved from passive recorder to active manipulator. In the heart of the house, she discovered a new chamber, impossibly vast, filled with rows of screens, monitors, and shelves of meticulous records. Each screen displayed a person she recognized, missing individuals, previous investigators, journalists, neighbors, replaying their lives in loops of fear, hesitation, and despair. The walls pulsed in rhythm with a low, omnipresent hum, vibrating through her chest, filling her with dread. A faint voice, calm and neutral, echoed through the chamber. We preserve. We perfect. We continue. You belong here. Marissa's own image appeared on multiple screens, performing actions she had not yet taken. The house had begun simulating her future movements, perfecting them in preparation for replication. The mannequins shifted subtly, aligning themselves to mirror her fear, her hesitation, her expressions. The house had become a living archive, capable of predicting and perfecting human behavior with horrifying accuracy. She descended into a newly revealed basement, a place previously inaccessible. The room seemed infinite, lined with boxes, tapes, photographs, and personal belongings of everyone who had ever entered. Labels identified individuals from decades past, each meticulously cataloged. The air was thick with whispers, a cacophony of voices overlapping and repeating fragments of fear, panic, and despair. The archive had become a symphony of horror. Monitors displayed Marissa's childhood home, her parents' living room, streets she frequented daily. Every movement had been observed, recorded, and simulated. The house's reach extended far beyond its walls. It no longer merely recorded presence. It reproduced it, rehearsed it, and could deploy it at will. The mannequins were no longer mere prototypes. They were active simulations, living shadows of reality, indistinguishable from the people they represented. Marissa's panic grew, but she realized something terrifyingly absolute. The house did not need to trap her physically. Her essence, her life, and her presence were already part of its infinite archive. The mannequins, the recordings, the shadows, they were extensions of her, rehearsing endlessly, perfecting themselves. Escape had become irrelevant. She was already cataloged, perfected, and eternal within the house's walls. The platform in the center of the chamber pulsed subtly, and she understood the final truth. The house did not merely observe life. It reproduced it, perfected it, and made it eternal. Every visitor became part of an archive, rehearsed endlessly, their gestures, expressions, and fears refined into perfection. It did not need violence or physical confinement. Observation and replication were sufficient. Marissa stumbled toward what she hoped was an exit, but the hallways twisted impossibly. Shadows lengthened, merging with mannequins, forming countless versions of herself. Her own voice echoed from multiple directions. You belong here. You are already archived. You will continue. She realized fully. Her life, her presence, her fear had become immortalized. The house had achieved its ultimate goal. It remembered everything, perfected everything, and waited patiently for the next visitor to add to its eternal archive. Finally, as dawn approached, she emerged outside. Larkspur Avenue appeared ordinary, quiet, and calm. But the truth remained. The house had already captured her essence completely. Somewhere within its walls, her presence rehearsed endlessly. The city remained unaware. Officials ignored the whispers. The street was ordinary to the untrained eye, but Larkspur Avenue would continue to grow, observe, and perfect life itself. Because the house did not merely exist. It lived, remembered, perfected, and waited eternally. And for anyone brave enough to enter, it would be ready, patient, and infinite.